Okay, good morning. My name is Roy Kessel, and welcome to this edition of the Sports Philanthropy webinar series. We're very excited today to host a town hall meeting on adaptive sports, and we've got a great panel with Doug Garner, Michelle Stroud, and Donna Callahan joining us to lead the conversation. But the goal is really to make this very exclusive in terms of having uh, an opportunity for everybody to have a conversation and participate. I think that there's some great opportunities that are on the horizon, and I know that it's really important to expand the conversation here and get more people involved in adaptive sports, to get more organizations finding ways to collaborate on adaptive sports programming. I want to just go through a few sort of housekeeping things. Not sure where seems to have a lot of background noise. So maybe if we could, if you're not talking, just have the mute on would probably be helpful. We love to have the cameras on so we can see everybody. We've still got more people signing up. I'm seeing the registrations pop in even as we're getting started. So we'll get a lot of participation here. On behalf of myself and Kayla, who's our VP of Community Development and the Sports Philanthropy Network, we want to welcome everybody here today. I think this is going to be a very important conversation, and for those that aren't able to join us, it is being recorded. It will be posted later tonight up on the site, so it'll be something you will have the capability to share. And again, those people that are at other larger organizations that weren't able to be here today, I'm going to send specific direction to them for the page and all of the information that we go over. You will end up getting a survey over the weekend about the webinars and different topics that you'd like to see. So I encourage you to share with us what additional topics you'd like to see over the course of the next month. A lot of it has already been scheduled, but I know for most of the country, we're going to be this stay-at-home mentality at least through the end of May, and then we may go to a weekly format after that if people are moving about. I encourage you also to take a look at some of the other resources we have up on the site. We created a special COVID-19 sports resource page. If you have additional resources you'd like us to post and put up there, please share them with us. We have the webinars Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Our podcasts come out Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And we do a weekly newsstand that's released on Monday with kind of summary of all of the articles we found over the course of the week. So if you find anything interesting that you'd like to have us include, please make sure to send that along. And then follow us on social media. We try not to burn out the email list by sending out a lot of specific emails, but everything that we do is easily located on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and we appreciate you participating. So before we get started with the core of the presentation, I'm going to just have everybody go around and introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll get started. So Kayla, why don't you lead it off with the introductions, and then we'll go around.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kayla Bradham. I'm the VP of Community Development for the Sports Philanthropy Network, and I was blessed to last spring at one of the adaptive triathlons here in southeastern Wisconsin.
Great. Brandon?
Hello, I'm Brandon. I'm a student board member of an organization in Buffalo, New York called Boys on Right Track, teaching leadership skills and life skills.
Terrific. Carrie? Oh, Carrie's on mute.
Sorry,
Oh, okay.
hold on, had to get off mute. I'm Carrie Sirota. I am one of 3 co-founders and serve as the executive director of Dare to Try, and we are based in Chicago, Illinois.
Terrific. Thank you. Lauren?
Hi, I'm Lauren Perry. I am a Rec and Athletics Coordinator at Lakeshore Foundation in Birmingham, Alabama, and also coach wheelchair basketball and track and field.
Fantastic. Eileen?
I'm Eileen May West. I'm our program director for Wasatch Adaptive Sports. We're based at Snowbird in Utah in the winter and Salt Lake in the summer.
Great. Janet? Oh,
Hello, I'm Janet Patton, and I am the director of the Achilles Freedom Team, which is a program under the umbrella of Achilles International, and our one office is in New York City.
fantastic. We have somebody who's on a 240 area code.
That's me. It's Heidi. I'm on en route to get back to the house from the grocery store. So I'm Heidi. Good morning, everyone. With the founder of Green Kite Fundraising.
Great, Heidi. Thanks for jumping in. Crystal?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Crystal Lean. I'm the program director at Chicago Run. We are a youth running and physical fitness program based in Chicago.
Great. Howard, nice to see you.
Hey, Roy. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Greetings from a very warm Southern California. Howard Broadwin with Sports and Social Change. I do consulting work in the sport for development community, and I've been in the adaptive community for about 10 years, working with the Disability Sports Festival, Blind Judo Foundation, and most notably Angel City Sports and the Angel City Games, and serve as a board member for Active Sports USA.
Terrific. Thanks for being here. Alexa?
Good morning. I'm Alexa Stewart. I'm calling in from Nike. I work with our social and community impact team focused on getting kids active.
Great. We're glad you could make it. Michael?
Hi, Michael Anderson. I'm the director of the New York City chapter of Achilles International. I think most of you know Achilles. We empower athletes with all types of disabilities to get out, run, walk, and get involved with triathlons and wheelchair sports.
Fantastic. Roberto, nice to see you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Roberto Coquise. I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, otherwise known as SAMHSA, here in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Great. Well, it's nice to have everybody with us. What we're going to do as a format today, I encourage you to put your questions into the chat box so that everybody can see them. We're really having this designed to be a conversation. So we're going to start with each of Doug and Michelle and Donna going through and giving a little bit of their background and talking about their organizations and some of the challenges that they see on the horizon and some of the opportunities that are there given everything that's going on now. So Donna, do you want to lead it off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. So great to see so many familiar faces on our webinar today. Thank you for joining us. Donna Callahan, I'm the owner and CEO, founder of All in Sport Consulting, which is a consulting group that works with the disability sport movement across the country. Work to have a positive impact and get more participation and involvement related to disability sport. I've worked with all 4 national multi-sport, multi-disability organizations. So I have a wide range of experience working with all sorts of organizations, including Dare to Try, and good to see Lauren from Lakeshore on this morning. So super excited to share with you and kind of just touch base and see how everybody's doing during this difficult time. So thank you again for joining us, and look forward to chatting this morning.
Okay. Well, then there's Donna's information.
Oh, and there's mine.
We'll make sure that
there's my contact info.
Yep, and we'll make sure that these are posted. We will have that for everybody available after the presentation as well. Michelle, do you want to jump in? I'll pop your information up as well.
Sure. Hi, my name is Michelle Stroud. I'm with Dare to Try. I'm the Director of Development with the organization. Carrie's also on the call. You've met her already. We're an organization that's committed to enhancing the lives of individuals with physical disabilities and visual impairments through community-based sports. We focus on swimming, biking, and running, which are also the elements of triathlon. So we support a community of people that range from people who just want to participate in a single sport, get active again, as well as people who are competing at the highest levels in paratriathlon. So we cover a broad range of service and a pretty broad community. Really, and we're based, as Carrie mentioned, here in Chicago. Really excited to hear from everybody and chat and talk about how things are going.
Great, thank you. Doug, do you want to jump in?
Sure. My name is Doug Garner. I am the Adapted Sports Director at University of Texas-Arlington. I coach our men's wheelchair basketball team. I've been involved in adapted sports since '92. My son was born with spina bifida. He was 6 at the time. We got started in road racing and triathlon and basketball, and just kind of came up through the system. So while I'm interested in high performance sports and train a few Paralympians at UTA, I'm also interested in using sport as a vehicle to help people with disabilities get their education, maintain their motivation to graduate high school, to go to college, to get their degree. So we kind of use that approach at UTA.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think what we wanted to do was open it up. I think the conversation we want to focus on today is it really got a few prongs. So number one, maybe as the biggest picture, is what can we do as an adaptive sports community to try to get other organizations more engaged in helping adaptive sports athletes and referring them to work with groups. As we know, there's many organizations around. On our planning call, we talked about some of the largest groups that are in the sports philanthropy space that really do not reach out very much to the adaptive sports community. Don't, we talk about inclusivity, they talk about diversity, but oftentimes the adaptive sports community is really left out of that conversation. So I don't know what success people have had or what strategies people have tried in terms of reaching out and engaging with those types of organizations. So Michelle, I know that you've had some experience there trying to reach out to different groups. Maybe that's something you want to touch on.
Sure. I think where I'd like to start is, just acknowledging the environment that we're all living in right now, and the fact that for us, that's presented a tremendous opportunity to look at how we train, how we reach out to people, and how we interact as a community. So for us, we had virtual training as part of our long-term strategic plan, and we're kind of teasing that out and starting to figure out what that might look like through, long distance training plans and things like that. And this gave us an opportunity to go, 3,000% and jump in full on. What's really exciting about that is that we are serving an extraordinary number of people. I think as of today, we're up to over 150 athletes have joined us for virtual training. So we do that on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We have strength training. On Mondays and Fridays, we have Zwift bicycle rides. And we've got people logging in from, I think we're up to 32 states now. So of course we're athletes, so we've set the goal to make it to 50. So if you're in some of those, Alaska, we're trying to hit Alaska, Hawaii, please join us. But more seriously, it's what's really interesting is, 25% of the people that are joining us are completely new to Dare to Try. And what's also really exciting about that is that a large number of the people who are joining us are people who are not necessarily would be classified as adaptive athletes. So coaches, friends, family, and it really makes a wonderful case for inclusivity. And that, for us, the sports that we focus on, a big part of that is because those are sports where someone who's disabled can participate alongside someone who is not disabled. And so what we're seeing here is that we have a really wonderful opportunity. If we make the training available to people and if we share that opportunity with people, people are joining us. So I think a lot of the outreach is just letting people know that it's there. So a big part of it is just letting people know that it's not all that different than regular training. And I know Donna's got some strong things to say about kind of what it means to be an adaptive athlete. But, you know, what we're discovering is if you let people know it's there, they come. And it's really, really exciting for us. We're really thrilled about the exposure that we're getting as an organization, but even more meaningfully is how many people we're able to reach and bring into this community. It's really exciting that we're able to serve so many people right now.
I think that's fantastic that you're getting that outreach and the additional opportunity. Obviously, what we're going through right now is a struggle and a challenge, but I think that it's really going to change the way things progress in the future. By all accounts, we're not going to get back to anything that resembles the prior state of affairs that we had a few months ago for probably another year and a half before everything's truly completely back to normal. But Donna, you know, I know you've expressed some issues in terms of opportunities and outreach and attempts to get other organizations involved. Why don't you share some of that information?
Sure. I guess I would just love to see when bigger organizations such as Project Play or Laureus talk about youth sport, that they also make sure to include adapted sport and adapted sport organizations and those athletes. I know that there's kids living in not so great neighborhoods and not so great situations, and if they're also a minority with a disability, say CP or spina bifida, it just makes it even more challenging for them to access sport. So I would really love to see how we can figure out how to get them more engaged and better educated and raise more awareness, because I really think that when we talk about sport, that we need to also make sure that adapted sport is also included in the conversation. I know as we were planning our session last week that we talked about, you know, sport is sport is sport. So it doesn't matter if you have a disability or what your situation is. I'd like to somehow broaden that conversation to be more inclusive of athletes with disabilities. So I've been to the Project Play, or not Project Play, the Laureus conference a couple years ago. And I actually went up to Edwin Moses during one of our breaks and told him I felt pretty lonely because it was myself and Eli from Brown University who was there. And, you know, I just felt that they really didn't touch a whole lot on adapted sport or athletes, and think that there's a really great opportunity to open up a whole new world to these organizations. I think their leadership could learn a lot from adapted sport leadership. This week there was a conversation out on LinkedIn about, you know, how do we open up sport? How do we bring sport back? And I commented to the editor that said that, you know, I think they should look towards leaders of adapted sport programs, because we have to adapt and change and pivot and be creative on a regular basis. So this really isn't anything new for us to kind of live in this situation, and really appreciate how Dare to Try and other organizations have really stepped up during these challenging times and have figured out some really innovative, really far-reaching ways to reach their athletes and their community.
Yeah, and I think Carrie raises a good point about the Women's Sports Foundation that does make more of an effort to include individuals with disabilities. And I think one of the areas that is incumbent on us to try to focus on is using those examples and highlighting those examples and reaching out to the organizations that have, I'm not saying that they're resistant in theory, but in practice, as you're saying, when you've gone to events and have not felt included in that same type of way, I think that's something that we have to keep pushing on and keep making those strides to have them recognize the issues that are there for adaptive sports. And when you brought up the issue of sports is sports is sports, I think in that context, the idea is sports are important for everybody. And so adaptive athletes that want to participate and need that element of competition and exertion and training and everything that goes along with it, that's what they want to experience. And so they've got to be given the platform and the opportunity. And I think there's so many ways that they can participate. But the challenge is, and this is where I want to turn it over to Doug, a lot of organizations in communities and universities aren't really sure how to set up an adaptive sports program. Doug and I have spoken. I want Doug to share a little bit of his background at the University of Texas-Arlington and where he sees the landscape of college sports.
Sure, thanks, Roy. And yeah, absolutely, sports are sports are sports. And I think one of the issues that we work through as we're growing inclusion in adapted sports is some people, when they think of sports, they either assume that adapted athletes, or in my background, I was commissioner of the junior division with the NWBA for 15 years, that these opportunities are already out there and the kids are exposed to them at a young age and they're growing up as athletes and having those relationships and those experiences transitioning into their community, doing community events. So I think people either assume that those opportunities are out there and kids are participating, or our veterans who are coming home are participating, or somebody who is recently injured. But what we're finding out is a lot of them don't. We recruit athletes to the university who maybe they found out about sports walking through a mall, and somebody came up to them and said, "Hey, what grade are you in?" "I'm in 10th grade. Do you do sports?" They don't even know about the opportunities that are out there. So they either assume they're already out there or they just don't. When I had my son in 1986, we didn't know. But we were in the sports business, my wife and I. So at some point we're like, well, what's out there? And we started looking to find out. But if they're not touched by disability in some way, I think creating that awareness out there, that I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. There's some great organizations out there. Angel City, I'm going to mention Angel City in a minute because they just started an affiliation with the NFL, and NFL is getting involved in wheelchair football. And Lakeshore, Lauren said she's at Lakeshore, one of my favorite organizations in the whole world, with all the opportunities, yes, that they provide and do and reach out. And whenever I have a great intern who's going to work on a master's program, I try to send them down to Lakeshore because it's just an incredible organization. But it just makes me so happy to see all these organizations here, and a lot of them are already doing adaptive programming, and I think that's fantastic. My interest is getting it started at an earlier time when they're in school and their other able-bodied kids are learning how to gallop and trot and run. What are the kids with disabilities learning? Are they learning chair skills? Are they learning how to stop, start, turn, push backwards? A lot of the things that their able-bodied counterparts are learning. So getting them in the schools at an early age, getting them connected to the community service guys that are out there, so that they can have those same developmental opportunities. And that involves training coaches, training trainers as far as strength and conditioning, all the components of athletic development.
I think one of the challenges that I see as I've listened to this conversation and been at many of those conferences that Donna was referencing, whether it's Laureus, Aspen Project Play, Beyond Sport, I think that this is a conversation that's missing in many of those areas. So how do we get this issue in front of those groups? What do you think is the best way? I don't know what people have necessarily tried to create in terms of relationships. I think that each of those groups do a tremendous job bringing people together and discussing a whole array of issues. And yet it is, as you mentioned, each of you have mentioned, it's disturbing that this is not an area that's really covered in that space. And I don't know, this is open for everybody for discussion. Doug and Michelle and Donna have graciously agreed to help lead the conversation, but by no means is that the extent of the conversation. I'd love to have input from other people that are here. So while people are thinking about how they want to participate, I'm going to kind of reach out to a few others that jumped in later to introduce themselves. So let's start with Parnes. Can you introduce yourself and your organization?
Yes, my name is Parnes Cartwright. I am part of the National Wheelchair Basketball Association Adult Committee, and I also am commissioner of the Florida Wheelchair Basketball Conference. My good friend Doug Garner invited me to this webinar today, and one of the things that my organization is doing right now is creating a website for the Florida Wheelchair Basketball Conference to not only assist our athletes, but get the information out there as far as what we do as not only as conference, but to show the videos of wheelchair basketball and to hopefully drive some traffic not only to our website but to NWBA and to start the conversation of what do athletes do once they are no longer juniors, once they are no longer part of a collegiate program. Is there how do we develop the professional leagues that should be in the United States?
Great, thank you. Carly, do you want to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Carly Stevens. I am the Business Development and Outreach Coordinator for Science of Sport. We promote STEM in different sports through basketball, soccer, football, and Summer Olympic sports. And I'm in LA, but I am from Chicago, so great to see a lot of Chicago people on here.
Okay. Erica?
Hi, my name's Erica, and I work with Aerostar Aviation Institute, and we teach underprivileged youth aviation, but we're always interested in keeping them busy with other things in life.
Great, thank you. I think one of the recurring themes that I've heard is the frustration of how to get more engagement with the larger sports community, number one, and then number two, looking at how do we get those organizations that don't have adaptive sports programs to collaborate with a lot of the people that are on here today, where you are already doing the work that needs to be done, but many of the groups don't send people your way or don't support the work that you're doing. Yeah, I know in Chicago, for example, in the suburbs, there's hundreds of travel sports programs. There's hundreds of park district leagues for every conceivable sport. And you know, where do the kids go when they don't fit in the regular sports models that are out there? Many of the parents have multiple children, and one of the child needs adaptive sports programming. They'll take their other kids to soccer and gymnastics and basketball and baseball, but what are they doing with the adaptive sports programs for the younger kids? Michelle, I know you're in this market, so maybe you have a sense of how.
Yeah, and actually, if you don't mind, I'd love to invite Carrie to comment on this because, I'm only with the organization for a year and I'm a development person. Carrie's the executive director, been here from the beginning, and Dare to Try has done some extraordinary outreach with some really amazing community partners. So I think Carrie would be great to talk to that if you don't mind. You're still on mute though. Oh, there you go.
Okay, thank you. And Roy, I can definitely echo what you said. It's very interesting to try to tell a parent about an adaptive sports program when, they are taking their two other, kids to multiple different things and traveling out of state for baseball tournaments. And oftentimes we'll hear, but we already have PT and OT and, we can't add one more thing in. But one of the things that we have found success with and even did when I was at Lakeshore Foundation prior was really connecting with the prosthetists, the physical therapists, the occupational therapists. Most of them have either weekly or monthly full team meetings, and we try to get on their schedule a couple times a year, take 15 or 20 minutes or whatever they'll give us, and come in and talk directly to those folks, to the PTs, to the OTs, and let them know about who we are and what we're doing and how we can complement what they're working on. A lot of what we're doing is functional. We emphasize the fun, but the functional aspects of what they're doing in physical therapy. There are so many kids that are in physical therapy for years and years and years, and they're 8, 9 years old and they don't know how to throw or catch because they never had the time to play outside and they didn't have anyone to teach them. But for us, it's been really finding the allies in the therapists, in the prosthetists, the doctors as well, but oftentimes the doctors have a little bit less face time with the patients. But the folks like the therapists and the prosthetists and the orthotists and those folks are seeing these individuals on a much more regular basis. And we've even had luck where we'll host an event in the parking lot of the therapy clinic. We'll bring some bikes out there. The therapists are there and the patients and their families are more likely to show up because they already have this built-in trust and relationship with the therapist. And then once their kid bikes and they see the joy on their face, then they're willing to take that additional step. But a lot of times it's going to them. We're doing that right now, even with, we've got our virtual strength training going on. We reached out to the Spina Bifida Association. They have a support group of adults with spina bifida that are not particularly physically active. Those are folks that probably would see our strength training and say, that's not for me, I'm not an athlete. And so we're doing an introductory strength program just for that group to teach them it, to show them the modifications, to give them the confidence to then hopefully join in on some of what else we're doing. But a lot of those really kind of in their comfort zones, at their therapy clinics, in their neighborhoods, exposes them and then gives them the confidence and the drive to kind of come out of their comfort zone and attend something bigger that you're hosting.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing. And I guess one thing that I will encourage, just as it's true in a lot of areas, the message has to keep being reinforced. I hate to see people giving up just because you run into a roadblock with one person or one organization, or in many cases it's one sort of regime in an organization, meaning a lot of the organizations have staff and leadership changes every 2 or 3 years. And so just because you've tried to work with an organization and they have not been particularly receptive, maybe it's just that person, that individual. Not suggesting in any way that that's good or that they're handling it properly, but it's just a reality when people are pulled a lot of directions and they prioritize their time. I think one thing as a group that we need to talk about, and Howard, I'd love to have you jump in and share some of your experiences in this space, because I know you've done a lot of work in this area.
Sure. Thanks, Roy. Yeah, I think one of the big things that we saw here in Southern California, and it's probably not unique, but it was definitely a factor for us. 5-6 years ago, there were a smattering of programs here. Not really very much happening at all. Just a little bit of programming in a variety of kind of scattered places. And as we started to try to build infrastructure for a program to service a big area, kind of going in and having meetings early on with, like we had a meeting with LA County Parks and Rec, and remember sitting in there kind of explaining what we're planning to do and what we need. And I had the comment come back that, well, all of our facilities are ADA compliant. It's like, well, that's nice, but someone who plays wheelchair basketball and maybe has their own chair can't just roll up to the gym and jump in a pickup game. Like, you have to create programming for this community. And, I think, again, in a lot of ways, I'm preaching to the choir here, because I think a lot of people on this call understand that. But I think that education piece is a big one, and getting people who are just in the sport community in general to understand, that there are, I think, as I've found, kind of three things that have to be in place. You have to have facilities, you have to have equipment, and you have to have coaches. And you can't run a program without all three of those. Even if you have two, you cannot run programming without all three. They're vital, because if you have coaches and facilities but no adaptive equipment, you're still not going to be able to run your programming. So I think it's understanding, from the programmer side, how do you connect the dots to facilitate all three of those? And there's a lot of great resources in this community for coaching and great resources for equipment. And facilities is something that has to be solved on a local basis. And a lot of times that it could be with private facilities. We had some good success here in Southern Cal with some individual, gyms and larger scale kind of, recreational sports facilities that were privately owned to be able to open up for things like wheelchair basketball and sitting volleyball. But as you get into larger scale things, you want to do track and field, you're probably going to have to go to a school of some sort to use a track. So then you get into education of, well, why would I let somebody in a wheelchair onto my track? Is it going to damage my track? Like, all of these things, it's this education. That's, I think, one of the biggest pieces of this on a localized level that everybody kind of has to get into with their, kind of community leadership and community government to get them to understand, what's necessary. But yeah, I think that was probably, I think, our biggest learning here. I'll stop there.
Well, at the outset, the way you started, where people are talking about having ADA compliant facilities, that just strikes me as such an ignorant type of comment. I mean, that's like saying, I've got a door to the building, and therefore, kids from the neighborhood should be, just running their own programs. I mean, without putting together a structure, and as you said, using the three things in terms of facilities, equipment, and coaches. I know that's a struggle Doug's talked about many times in terms of the costs of the equipment and everything like that. And maybe, that's something you can speak to, Doug.
Well, before you get in, I just want to say one thing too. Carrie's point about the outreach into the therapy community is vital. And that's, again, one of the only reasons we were able to grow programming here in the region was heavy outreach into the PT, OT, and rec therapy community as much as we possibly could. And, we have a big geography here, stretching, because we're trying to cover 5 counties that make up Southern California, that covers about 20 million people. So we have a massive amount of outreach work. But the big thing, because Carrie's right, I mean, that community is dynamite to understand what adaptive sports is and how important and how vital it is for the disability population. But it is the general medical community that I think we've found still needs a lot of education, because we still meet families with a child who the parent will say, the doctors told me my kid would never play sports. And I see nodding heads on here because we all hear it. And that tells me that further up the chain, there's still a problem. There's still folks in the medical community, in the general medical community, that haven't been educated on what adaptive sports is. So if somebody has a child and they're born with spina bifida, we don't want a doctor ever saying, I'm sorry, your child's never going to play sports. Like, that has to stop. And I'm not sure how we as a community do that. But that is, because that puts a lot of these families, and Doug, I think, said it earlier, like, you don't know when if you have a child who's got a congenital impairment, you have no idea, because this is all new to you. So the last thing you want to be told is nothing, you're never going to do anything. So I don't know the solution, but that one's always kind of puzzled me as to how do we in the adaptive community get further entrenched in the medical community to educate those to not have that kind of language at the very beginning.
So can I ask a real quick question to the folks on the call? Do you think it would be valuable to have national organizations, national youth sport organizations kind of carry a flag for us? Do you think that would be helpful? Do you think it'd be nice to be included in conversations and initiatives that they're working on? I don't know. I'm honestly throwing it out there. I know right now that the adaptive sport community, in my opinion, is very fragmented. And if there was a national push or national representation from one of those organizations, would that be helpful for you guys in some of these challenging educational, meeting with Parks and Rec kind of challenges that you have? Would that be helpful? Okay, thanks, Howard. Okay.
I think National Federation of High Schools, I don't hear a lot of from that area, and state activity associations. Now we're at the highest peak we've seen as far as state high schools that are including adapted sports. But I was about to enter in there when you talked about cost, Roy. There are, in the United States right now, less than 100 wheelchair basketball teams for kids in the whole country, probably around 90. In 94, there were less than 16 teams. So there's been some growth, but one of the things that prevents growth is a school looking at, oh, I need sport chairs. And if I get 10 sport chairs, we're looking at $30,000 to $50,000. So I think cost has been a factor in growth, at least in those areas. And also Parks and Rec. The cost of providing programs includes the cost of equipment. So one of the things we're working with our engineering, our School of Engineering, is trying to get some of our students as their design projects to come up with a lower cost sport wheelchair that would help schools and Parks and Recs and community organizations have more equipment and more equipment available.
I think the cost is always a big issue. I know Michelle, that's one of her big focuses is on raising money and having the resources to attack that type of problem. You deal with a lot of athletes in many different types of competition, and obviously a lot of different types of disabilities. Maybe that's an area you can touch on as well.
So are you asking about how we're raising money or what we're raising money for?
I think more focused on what you're raising money for in terms of the magnitude of the costs that you see in running the adaptive sports programs.
Well, we're focused on swimming, biking, and running specifically. So we're raising money to support a variety of programming. So that goes everything from our weekly practices to we run a number of camps during the summertime. But we have practices almost year round. And then we also have a grant program for our athletes. There's some qualifications for that in terms of participation and longevity. And so we have an equipment granting program to our athletes as well. But the fundraising really is to support, all of those things. So, and I think from a fundraising standpoint, you're really, I think what's most effective is communicating impact as opposed to, one of the campaigns that we like to do is kind of sponsor an athlete or sponsor a camp. So during different times of the year, we might make specific asks for specific, kind of, it's $650 to send an athlete to camp, and people can pay for portions of that or the whole thing. But in general, we're raising money to support all of the programming of the organization. And so for some people some people like to pay for something. They like to know that, X number of dollars pays for Y thing. For other folks, it's about, I want to support the impact that this organization provides. And so that really comes through effective storytelling and showing people what it is we're doing and the impact of what we're doing. So, the fundraising really depends upon who we're talking to and the time of year. But, so it could vary from asking for people to pay for specific things. That's very common at galas, things like that, where we fund a need. Or it's just general campaign to support the organization as a whole, because, it's not just equipment that we're paying for. We're paying for equipment. We're asking people to support access. And so access takes a lot of different forms. That's access to equipment, certainly, as a couple people have mentioned, but it's also access to expert training. And so access to coaching and training plans. It's also paying for facilities, access to facilities. And we're very fortunate that that the Chicago Park District supports a lot of our programming, but we still need to pay for facilities for camps and things like that. It's also access to transportation. That is a huge, as most people on this call know, that is a massive barrier for a lot of athletes. And so we actually have our own bus. But it's also helping to support people's transportation to come to camps. One of the things that we've talked about, I mentioned earlier, the increase in service that we're seeing, or the reach of our service right now. Some of those people are actually folks in and around the Chicago area that where access to our regular practices is a barrier. Well, that's been eliminated. That transportation barrier has been eliminated because we're doing training virtually, and they can now train in their own homes. So it's really, I think I'm not really answering the question very specifically, but from a fundraising standpoint, it really is about connecting with, what is demonstrating impact for your organization, and then connecting with what resonates with your donors. So for some people, it's about supporting infrastructure. For other people, it's about supporting specific initiatives. So it's really finding ways to connect with the various objectives of each of those donors and what's important to them.
I think those are great points. I see a lot of heads nodding. I see Janet with, do you want to jump in and share some of your experience from Achilles in terms of some of the challenges and opportunities that you've seen both from this COVID crisis and beyond?
Sure. I don't know that I have a whole lot of expertise to offer, but I'm loving hearing all of this. The disruption creates opportunity mantra is what I think we're all doing, and our athletes are peppered around the globe, just like several of yours. So it's hard to bring them together, even though bringing them together is so much what we do. So we're having to adapt that. But in that adaptation, you're right, our people are experts at that. So lucky for us. And the virtual aspect is we're able to reach so many more people all the time. So that is exciting. In terms of equipment and all of that, my wheelhouse is with our nation's vets. And luckily, equipment-wise, they're supported pretty well. And Achilles in general serves all athletes with disabilities. So there's a lot of crossover and tips shared, which is a really beautiful thing. There are donation programs where maybe some of our vets have equipment that they don't use anymore. It can be tweaked for other people. That's a great thing to see. But yeah, travel, when we come together, we are in the marathon space. So 26.2 miles is our focus for most of our programming, and it's race entry fees and advocating in that space. I work with Carrie a lot with Chicago Marathon, and just educating people about, this shouldn't be an inconvenience. This is actually enhancing your party that you're throwing. We talk a lot about how athletes with disabilities really are VIPs in many situations. That mainstreaming is important with Achilles. That everyone's rubbing elbows together, and the more we see of that, the more better everything will be. Mo better. Yeah, I mean, this time is very interesting. I love being a part of this group because we are a bit disjointed. I see that too. I get that. And in some ways that serves, it serves to have small groups. People really connect in groups of 8 to 10, and they feel like it's, a chosen family, and that's good maybe to not have it be 1,000. Sometimes you need that little personal vibe. But if we could all band together in a big way, which Donna is totally going with in the last couple of years, yeah. Man, maybe that's going to be the fix. Like, I don't know. Now I'm rambling. Sorry, Roy. That's what you get when you open it up to me.
Well, and that's what we want to hear, the different perspectives. And I encourage anybody else to jump in as well. I know one of the issues that's been raised, I'll come to you in a minute, Parnas. Brandon talked about other sports beyond the running, the wheelchair basketball, some of the individualized sports, but the opportunities to really play. I know Doug and I on his podcast recently spoke about the fact that there's a number of schools that are trying to expand the offerings that are out there. And I'm interested to hear what other organizations might be doing. Parnas, you wanted to jump in?
Yes, I wanted to just kind of lend my support to what Janet, Donna, and Howard said about coming together. I think that, yes, you have to have the small groups to kind of keep a focus, and to have a large group to actually connect with everybody, knowing that we're all trying to further the mission of adaptive sport is important. And one of the things that I think that was talked about is having that venue that you can go to. I know that for community programs, one of the things that they may not have is that place where they can say, my athlete can go here. My athlete does not have to, that my athlete, if it's wheelchair basketball, they're going to have some time set aside for that particular sport, and that's creating the relationships within those communities that allows somebody to maybe get that athlete or get those athletes on the court enough time to work with trainers, coaches, and just the athletes themselves, so that they can just enjoy what other athletes enjoy, which is just playing together.
Right. I think that's a great point. I know Carrie wanted to jump in here.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, as far as the power of the collective group, Disabled Sports USA, which most people on this call are probably familiar with. I'm sure most people are also aware that U.S. Paralympics has sort of now gone away from supporting Paralympic sport clubs, and Disabled Sports USA has sort of stepped up and taken those. And I've really seen them have a lot of success with major companies and with funding, because they're speaking for a collective group across the country, serving various populations from youth to adults to veterans across all kinds of sports, recreational, competitive. And they've really been able to sort of garner the spirit of the collective group and have one voice, and have had a lot of success with some major companies to be able to bring in money and then sort of be able to give it out to the smaller groups that might not ever get to the table with some of those companies. So I think, to what Donna was saying, there is a lot of power in us collectively being a group and having a collective voice while all sort of serving our own populations.
Right, and I know I love the conversation. I know we're coming up on the hour that was scheduled. I'm happy to stay on here. I think we're having a good conversation, so I would encourage people to stay as long as you feel that it's productive, but I certainly want to recognize the time limits that people may have due to other obligations. Carly, I know you had a question that you wanted to talk about how groups can connect and partner with other organizations that are not part of the adaptive sports community.
Yeah, we as an organization don't at times work with the adaptive sports community. So I was wondering if anyone, on this panel had any ideas for us to partner or, provide our programming for a wider base. We just promote STEM programming in different sports, and now we're going virtual with videos and webinars. So just curious what other people had to say about that.
So Carly, you're in the LA area, correct?
Yes, I am.
Howard, your guy.
Yeah, hi Carly.
Hi, Howard.
Thank you, Donna. Yeah, in fact, you know what, Carly, I think what would be interesting, so just as an example, so about, gosh, maybe, I was going to say it was 3 or 4, but it may have been more like 5 or 5 years ago. Yeah, I worked on a project at UCLA Anderson in the business school, and it was more of a business approach, but we were really looking into the effects of 3D printing on the adaptive sports community. And that was 5 years ago. It was 2015. So it was kind of a very early stage for where 3D printing was. And that's kind of come a long way in 5 years, but that's just an example, I think, of where STEM education intersects the adaptive sports community is a perfect sweet spot, because this is a community full of people who rely upon, not all, but a lot of them rely upon assistive devices, and those assistive devices are all built around technology and engineering and math and science. So I think that there's a really interesting intersection there that could be explored and should be explored, and it's going to take kind of connecting the dots between how sport and disability and innovation all kind of meet. I think you've got a really unique place, and happy to I'm here in LA, so happy to explore all of that with you and connect to the programs all over here and all over all around the country too.
Thank you. Would love to speak further. We do programming all over the country. So, but right now everything's virtual. So just trying to expand our audience and give access to our resources as well. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll put my info in the chat.
Yeah. Not specific to your question, Carly, but in general, I think one of the things that is really effective too is to reach out beyond our own community. And what I mean by that is join networking group. I'm part of 3 different networking groups that have nothing to do with adaptive sports. And really, one of them is general sports. There's this, which is sports philanthropy. There's a couple others, and really just, force your way to the table. Be part of the conversation that people are having about sports and activity and youth and participation. And it isn't necessarily about I'm representing the adaptive community. I'm just part of this community, the larger community. And I think when you kind of put yourself there, people, nobody's ever said you don't belong here because you work in adaptive sports. Everybody's like, wow, I'm so excited to learn about this. And so I think a lot of, in terms of, we're talking about having a bigger voice, sometimes you just have to put yourself there. And, and maybe that's a personality thing, but I think it's been really effective in terms of being able to have larger conversations, and, just whether it's getting in front of sponsors or sports teams or, connecting with other people in the larger community. There's no reason why any of us shouldn't be part of that conversation. So, I think taking yourself out of that framework of, well, I'm an adaptive sports person, or I work with disability. No, we work in sports. We work with youth. We work with the larger community, and you should be at every conversation that has to do with any of those things.
And I want to echo what Michelle's saying, because I think that's a crucial point. And I think when you look at what work you're doing, you're no different than any other organization that's working in the community, whether they're working in inner city environment, whether they're working on a specific sport, which is soccer, hockey, football, tennis, basketball, right? Every sport has groups that are working in that space. They all have to go out and create partnerships. They all have to look for sponsors for their events and their program, aside from the traditional fundraising. And I think that it's a unique opportunity to be able to go and interact, and you've got something very different and very tangible that you have to show them and to offer, because you're not going to be the same as many other organizations that approach them. And I think that that actually can give you an advantage with the story and the benefit for those organizations that you want to partner with, because I think that the challenge is getting in front and getting somebody to listen to your story. And as Michelle said, that's part of being out in the community and interacting both in the business community and in the sports community, and really getting a sense for, how do I engage other people that are around? You're typically in this, anywhere in the sports philanthropy world, you're going to get really good response from people in the sports business world, and from a lot of people in the regular business world, because so many people are involved in sports at some level, and so many companies are involved in sports at some level. So take advantage of those opportunities. Don't necessarily follow a script, because you've got an individual style personally. Your organization has a style and a focus with the type of work that you do. And I encourage you to highlight those types of stories. If you want to reach out to me and talk through ideas and ways to present things, or ways that we might be able to help you in terms of spotlighting things on a podcast and an organizational article, I think that those are all things that that can be done. Kayla, did you want to jump in quick?
Yeah, no, I think this is a great conversation, you guys. It's something that's really dear to my heart. Most of you know, some of you might not, I'm also a high school language arts teacher. And so just really seeing the impact that sports can have on these students, and everybody's at a different level and equipped with different abilities. So to be able to see what you guys are doing to bring impact into your communities is really encouraging. And with that said, I'm going to be honest and tell you guys, I have a parent-teacher conference at 11:15 this morning. So I'm going to hop off, but before I do, I want to say thank you for all of the work that you guys are doing. It's very encouraging.
Great. Thank you, Kayla. And I don't want to cut off the conversation again. I think there's a lot of good topics being raised here. You know, Michael, I saw you nodding and looking like you were ready to jump in down there. I don't know if you want to say something, participate.
Yeah, thanks, Roy. I just really wanted to applaud all the other organizations for what they have done. I think our thinking was all very similar. We couldn't get together as a group to get exercising indoors or out. And a lot of us said, well, there must be some good content out there for those with disabilities. Only to find out immediately that there was very little. So I've seen what Dare to Try has done. I've seen what the Northwest Association for the Blind has done. And Achilles, we were right there with you all. We all stepped up and said, let's create our own content. So in our case, Francesco Magistano, he is the director of our triathlon team. He is a blind athlete himself. So who better to get out there and create cardio indoor videos, which has been wonderful. Janet and the staff from Team Achilles Kids put together some great videos for the community. And I just really loved the forward thinking that everyone did. We encouraged everybody to videotape themselves doing the exercises and saying thank you. And we just sent out a video to our community, 2-minute video, maybe it was 90 seconds, just saying, thank you, everybody. Thank you for keeping us fit. And that ended up being a nice little opportunity for us to connect with our donors. And it was nice. A lot of them reached out and said, this is so wonderful. to see what you're doing, and wow, it was really impactful, and it was very emotional actually. So that was really awesome, and so I applaud you all for doing the same things. And yeah, as far as equipment and things like that, it's just always going to be an ongoing battle. I wish that the city of New York, as helpful as they can be, would really just say, yeah, no problem. We're going to provide more storage for you in Central Park and things like that. We have a long ways to go until we get there. But like I said, I just encourage everyone to keep thinking outside the box, because conversations like this are.
And I want to touch on something that Doug just put in the chat box, which is the need for the business world to really look at this population as consumers and potential partners. If you look at the statistics nationally on how many people in the country have some type of physical disability or challenge, and what the spending power is of that population, it's enormous. And I think that's something that can be spotlighted as well, because you're talking about individuals that are participating in adaptive sports, but every single one of those people, it's likely that they are part of a family, that they have a network of friends, that they have people that are supporting their efforts and interested in seeing them compete and succeed, just the same as you have all kinds of friends that go and play softball or hockey or soccer together, and other people come and hang out and watch. So the fact that the adaptive athletes are playing, it's not just an influence of one person that's participating in the sport, right? You've got a whole ecosystem, in a sense, that's built around that community, not only for the sports element, but for everything else that's going on. And I think that as you develop ideas for sponsorship and for partnerships with organizations, those are really key elements to emphasize. And somebody brought up earlier in terms of facilities and Chicago Park District and a lot of the other organizations that have facilities. Many of those facilities have a lot of hours that they're not in use, right? They may have peak elements where they're getting top dollar for rentals. Many of them have hours they're not in use that you can talk to. Many of them have requirements under their leases or under their charters or other things like that of what percentage of time or services or things that they need to provide. And so it's always worth exploring that and playing to that angle. Again, you're going to run into the roadblocks, because once people are involved in the process, you're beholden to the personalities and things like that. But I encourage you to do that. I wanted to get Roberto, before he might have to jump off here, in terms of talking about some of the health and human services programs that he put up briefly in the box.
Yes, thank you, Roy. Like I mentioned, I'm with SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health side of the house, but one of our sister organizations is called the Administrations for Community Living. They're the ones that really deal with the elderly, but also with the disability folks, and that runs on both sides, the mentally challenged and also the physically disabled folks. They've got a great leader over there who comes from Oklahoma, big sports fan. So he may be open to helping out and opening up some doors and having some conversations. A lot also what the Administration for Community Living does is put out grants. So there may be opportunities for funding under those programs that I identified in the chat. So those are some things that are potential opportunities. I know that ACL, Administrations for Community Living, inherited one of the president's sports fitness programs, which is also within HHS, but under a different organization. So, Health and Human Services is about health, and that's health for all American people. So there are opportunities. If anybody needs some assistance or introductions, I'd be more than happy to help to open some of those doors. So that's a little bit about us. Like I mentioned, I'm with SAMHSA, Substance Abuse and Mental Health. So We also we personally look at the prevention and treatment of individuals with addictions, and also on the mental health side of issues.
Great. Thank you, Roberto. And I think that highlights one of the points that I want to emphasize, which is the goal of the Sports Philanthropy Network is to make resources available and help provide connections and interaction and opportunities for this kind of forum. If it's helpful, I'm happy to work with the people that are here and put together this kind of conversation on a regular basis, whatever people feel would be appropriate to come back and continue the conversation. I don't think that this is ever a conversation that ends. I think it's something that is ongoing, and there's more ideas and continuity. So I encourage you to let me know what you think would be appropriate on that end. And if there's other people that we can help connect you to that may be part of our network, or that we can reach out to as a network and try and pull in here, just as we talked about some of the larger organizations, that we're going to make sure that they get a copy of the town hall and understand that this is areas that they really have not addressed well up to this point. And recognize that there's a great need for it, even if the pure numbers are not as large as in some other areas. I bet that, if you take the total adaptive sports space and community in the United States, it's still a very large number. Michelle, you looked like you were getting ready to.
No, I was just going to say, before we sign off, I just wanted to invite everybody to join some of our adaptive practices, whether it's you or someone you know that needs some adaptive support. It's on our website. If you go under calendar, you'll see options. We have yoga. We're working with DSUSA to do some programming for them. And you'll also see our virtual strength training and virtual cycling. So please come and join us. Or share it with someone who you think would like to join us. It's a fun group. There were, I think, 18 of us on a bike ride this morning. So that was a lot of fun. Anyway, I wanted to extend that invitation to everybody here.
And I think Michelle posted that earlier in the chat. And when we post the video later tonight on the page, that'll kind of summarize part of the conversation here. If you've got other resources that you would like to share and have us spotlight on that page that is referenced for the town hall meeting, please make sure that you send those over to me so that we can get those posted, whether or not they relate directly to the COVID-19 timeframe. If they do, we'll put that on the COVID-19 sports resource page. But more importantly, I think that this is important information that can be shared with a lot of other groups.
Yeah. Our next session is in just over an hour. So come and join us for some stretching.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here. I know we kept everybody way over the time, but it felt like we were having a very productive conversation. I appreciate all the interaction and participation. It was terrific to have everybody here. Thank you for sharing, and we'll look forward to speaking to you all more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Roy.
Thank you, Roy.
Thank you, Roy. Thanks, everybody.